And welcome to the polling station. And it is the first polling station since the US president was arrested ever. So it's quite historic. And what's happened in Scotland as well? Real big ructions in the SNP. And what's this going to mean for the incumbent? We will talk about any other business as well. Get to the heart of British politics. There's only one place to start. Donald Trump did kind of get it right, kind of got it wrong. He was arrested on Tuesday. It actually could, and this is something that will energize Paul Krishnamurty. This is something that could galvanize his base, galvanize the party, and potentially increase his chance of being president in 2024, Paul.
I think in the short term, at least, it appears to have galvanized his chance of being the nominee. I still have grave doubts about its sustainability as other things develop. So, for example, I was watching a very convincing, at least, legal analyst last night explaining how Jack Smith was going to charge Trump within 60 days for the classified document for obstruction. And everything I know about that case does seem like it's an open and shut case, obstruction, because he clearly resisted attempts to get the documents back and lied about them. And that case, whereas this case in Manhattan, which I don't think is a particularly well-advised indictment to bring at all, because it is the sort of thing that would galvanise his base because it's just going over old ground. I don't think there's really any chance of that being done before the presidential election. And so that could well be hanging over him throughout, and that would help him. But the classified documents thing, apparently, this legal analyst was explaining that it would probably be done by early next year, and that there was a genuine chance that he could be in jail next year. You've also got the Georgia case, which again, for weeks, rather like this Manhattan thing, for weeks, it's been a case of we expect something to happen very, very soon, an indictment to be laid down very soon. Everything about it sounds like it's an open and shut case. So when all that piles on, I wonder what Trump's position will be. But in the short term, he does appear to have just opened up a really big lead over DeSantis, and maybe that's that. But regarding the actually winning the thing, I mean, 2-1 Joe Biden is now looking a fantastic bet. It really, really is. Are we really going to see let's be clear what the Trump campaign is now, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene was on 60 Minutes the other day, accusing Democrats of being paedophiles.
Which they are.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah, they're the Illuminati. So, what we're going to do, right? And not only do they get platformed on mainstream media saying this, but she's then using that to spread all over social media. And I think that the next election campaign, as far as Trump is concerned, is just going to be January the 6th every day. Now, I'm sorry, that doesn't strike me as an electoral strategy. I mean, and I don't think that the Mitch McConnells and the Mike Pences and all that will go along with it.
Yeah, you can tell us about revised vetting, William. Obviously, it's been described. I was just reading an article in the Irish Times today where it was the Stormy Daniels arrest was described as similar to Al Capone being done for tax evasion, in the sense that, as Paul mentioned, he has so many other things coming down the track. But I do find it fascinating that when you have essentially a black liberal who's trying to take down Trump in New York, that it galvanized the Republican base and seems to galvanize Republican voters, which sort of implies that this country is in a seriously shit situation at its very, very heart going into 2024.
Yeah, it is. Also, the nature of the judiciary in America is just so much more politicized than it is over here. They are seen as being inherently political, and Trump's using that very much to fundraise as much as he can. Just on the revised betting, we haven't had huge market moves. Normally what happens when somebody gets into this sort of trouble is the odds go. They're big drifters on Betfair, and then fixed odds follow behind. Here, we've had a situation where Trump, if anything, is short of this on the exchanges, and fixed odds have stayed the same, and that's because they're following the polling numbers, which haven't really changed. And of course, everything is so divided there that this isn't really seen very much as it's a sort of dirty mark against him. A lot of people just believe it's fake. It's a hit job now to get him. So it's playing into his hands for now, but more serious stuff to come down the line. And also this becomes a drag on time and attention and eventually resources. So I would agree with Paul. I think for now he can spin it into a net positive. I don't think that's sustainable though.
Paul, how are we in a situation in 2023 when the US is so divided that a large minority would still vote for Trump instead of voting for a benign leader of a centre-left, at best, Democratic Party, where it's not like you're voting against Jeremy Corbyn over here? How have we gotten to this state? Are people absolute idiots?
I think it's far bigger than America, to be honest. I think the whole world's in this position. And again, I was watching something yesterday with Maria Ressa, who is the Nobel Prize-winning journalist who's just been, targeted by organised crime for years in the Philippines and such forth. And she says that so long as we don't have truth, we do not have facts, we do not have a shared reality. And if we don't have a shared reality, we can't possibly have democracy. And the problem, as she rightly points out, and the same thing applies here, same thing applies across Europe and everywhere, the incentive structure is wrong. There is no disincentive for media to lie, or to carry lies. So, one of the most depressing things really about all of this on Tuesday was that every single media organisation in the world lapped it up. It was just wall to wall Trump and lies and nonsense, just like them CBS running Marjorie Taylor Greene and her smears on Sunday. I mean, I turned on Sky News, and I like Sky News. I think it's probably the best TV channel we've got. And they were just running without any context or clarification. Trump going on about the election being rigged and this witch hunt against him. It was just lie after lie after lie. And we've been here for 8 years now of Trump doing this and Trump's surrogates doing this. And, it's not surprising, therefore, that fakery has become reality for a large number of people. And I mean, really, if you wanted to really sort of bigger story, this predates Trump by a long way. This really goes back with Fox News. We're seeing it with the Dominion case in America. There is your problem. There is your problem. We have multiple shared realities, and the field is being left open to, intelligence ops, black ops, organised crime, just grifters, anybody who wants to make a few quid out of, radicalising people.
It really strikes at the heart of free speech as well, William, doesn't it? And I just I was minded to note on Twitter this week how somebody had died in direct provision in Ireland. Direct provisions is a really political hot potato, and just looked up the responses on Twitter, and there were 7 or 8 racist messages in a row, and this is in Ireland now, and you're like, so this is social media, and as Paul says, basically people are getting away with lies in America, and you're getting to the state now where either people are absolute idiots or they're polarized into believing that Trump is somehow a victim, which is utterly preposterous.
It is, but it's a culmination, like Paul says, of probably something over, maybe you could say, the last 3 decades or whatever, from the time when Roger Ailes took over Fox News or whatever. Like, hyperpartisanship has been weaponized really successfully in some areas of the world much more than others. And also, it's not to go too weedy and like be too nerdy about this, but it's also a product of the climate in your media terms and like what is allowed here. We have partisanship here, for example. We see it a lot with the print press, and that feeds into broadcast media, but not in such an overt way. It's about in a nerdy way, like what regulators will allow, etc., what's tolerated. But going back to this for Trump, etc., the one thing here which we can't forget is, it's all well and good winning a nomination, but when he gets to a general, and the working assumption is it's somebody versus Biden in 24, that's a working assumption. That somebody's got to then bring forward a case to beat Biden with independence. That, to me, looks a harder task now than it did a couple of years ago, a much harder task. And I think it might be almost impossible for somebody like Trump, in particular, to go to sort of the middle, the squeezed middle, basically, and say he's the guy, whether it be on the economy whether it be on improving healthcare, whether it be on improving general living standards, etc. I think it's really hard or impossible for him to sell himself as that guy, because he's baked in now. We've been going for this since 2016. So say he gets through all this or whatever, what's his general election strategy? Particularly if he's still mired in like more than one big legal case. So if it's the Mar-a-Lago stuff or Georgia or January 6th. I mean, even this trial, right, is like well into next year. He'll be back in December. He'll go to trial next year. How does he sell himself whilst going through all that is my thing.
Okay, well, Paul, and you've been consistent on this message for months and months and months now. Short of Biden rocking up to the election and looking like a candidate in the Father Tes over 75s priest competition and looking like he's about to literally pop his clogs, how can he lose to Trump if Trump gets the nomination? Because I just can't see any feasible way that Trump could win this vote, despite how partisan and screwed up American politics is, the Electoral College, yada, yada, yada. How can Trump, and we don't even know what's going to happen between now and the election, and if he gets there, how can he beat Biden?
Well, all I will say is I've been very negative on Trump's chances for 8 years. And the one time that he really surprised me, more than 2016, was getting 75 million votes in 2020 by managing to infuse that many people. I don't think that's going to happen, but you could say that if there was an economic crash, a stock market crash, which Trump's friends around the world, shall we call them, are trying to precipitate every day, right? And we've just seen OPEC raise oil prices, surprisingly, in what was very clearly an anti-dollar move, anti-Western move, and that's been reported as such. The White House have called it as such. Financial Times have called it as such. So there is an attempt to blow up the Western economy from the allies of Trump, right? If that happens, really all bets are off, because people might just vote for change. They might. I mean, Biden did benefit from an extraordinarily enthusiastic 81 million turnout from Americans desperate to get rid of Trump. I don't think that was a massive endorsement of Biden. It only takes, and he only won by a small margin in those critical states. I guarantee you, November 2024, whether it's Trump, whether it's DeSantis, whether we're going to be looking at Arizona and Georgia and Pennsylvania, and they're going to be on a knife edge, and we're going to have all of that drama again on election night. So he can win. I think he's got. I'm more inclined to say he can win now, not been at any point in the last 8 years, really.
I despair, William, for humans in general, in the sense that even if you look at what's gone on the last few months in terms of the climate in the US, it has been absolutely basket case from east to west across. You can basically drive 3 hours in the car and go from winter to summer in the last few days. And somehow this seems to be well down the list of American concerns. And Biden is the only man who's even vaguely trying to actually do anything about this relative to the Conservative Party. And it doesn't even seem to register with people, despite the fact that tornadoes in the South are 3 or 4 times the rate they should be. And then you've everything else that Trump stands for. I just cannot see how we've gotten to a situation where the land of the free is full of absolute lunatics.
There are lots of potential reasons behind that. I would say also, in terms of the climate and the fact it will play, I do believe it will continue to grow just as it hits home for more people. And recently, with all of the train derailments, environmental standards, etc., has become a much bigger issue. Biden got heat for not going to East Ohio. Pete Buttigieg got plenty of heat for not going there and being on the scene. And of course, that is something that I think will link back to Trump eventually, because standards for railway and freight were loosened by Biden's administration. So I think that is something actually to look forward to, because Biden's gone big on tying new technologies, electronic vehicles and such, and US manufacturing in one big package. He's bet big on that, and that will be a key part of 2024, even if it doesn't look like it now. Just thinking in general in terms of the market here, one of the things that Trump's going to need, I think, is a key issue he can go and really attack Biden on. I don't think necessarily his team have really been thinking about that as clearly as Biden's has. I mean, to be fair, Biden's more preoccupied with doing the job, but what's that key issue, right? Is it foreign policy, or is it the economy, or is it something else?
Hunter Biden's laptop. It's the
Hunter
laptop.
Biden, oh yeah, the Hunter Biden laptop story, sure, a great like attack line, but I wonder, I'm going to sound really naive when I say this, right? I don't think a one attack line thing will be enough. I think in 2016 he benefited from that being weaponized, but also he benefited from a poor campaign which didn't have enough of a big tent with Hillary Clinton. I think there's a slight danger that Biden doesn't carry as much left with him as he did last time, but I don't think it'll be like 2016 again.
Yeah, and Joe Biden's coming to Ireland as well, Paul, which isn't going to do any harm to his Irish American base.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's not coming to Britain for the coronation, which has angered a lot of people, right? Despite other American presidents not coming to coronations. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Joe Biden in Ireland next week.
Can I ask you just, this is off point here, but how would you price up the Republican nominee at the moment if you bullet to the head?
I think I'd have to say about 4 to 6 Trump, maybe even short. I'm running out of faith in Republicans ever seeing any kind of sense here.
Right.
And this is a road to nowhere. This is a road to civil war, right?
It is. I mean, it literally is.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, as I say, this campaign could be January 6th every day if they get their way. And in that case, who's going to stop him? And in that case, Joe Biden's a fantastic bet at 2 to 1. I wouldn't particularly want to be on Joe Biden against any other candidate necessarily. I think that would be a completely different contest, different dynamics. But I do think if it's a run of 2024, I'd make Trump about 4 to 6 for that. And I think in a head-to-head, Biden v. Trump, I'd probably go 4 to 7, 11 to 8 to Biden. So in which case, do the maths. 2 to 1 on Betfair, but Biden. He's probably going to announce very soon, at which point I would have thought it collapses to like evens, 11 to 10. And it's still going to be value then.
Let's move on to the S&P. Really extraordinary. We were on 8 days ago, maybe, and since then, its former chief executive Peter Murrell released without charge, following an investigation of the party finance, and of course he's none other than Nicola Sturgeon's husband. This has just been crazy since Nicola Sturgeon. It's almost as if Nicola Sturgeon, William, she obviously thought, I can't bring this party any further, but it's almost as if she knew there was shit coming down the tracks.
Yeah, the timing seems at the very least really, really coincidental. And yeah, basically that's pretty much all I can say about it, really. You see the timeline there for yourself. It's a massive problem for the S&P, who have not had good press in, at least a month or two. The leadership election was a fiasco for them. The candidate who eventually won had his ministerial record dragged through the mud on TV basically 2-3 times a week. There is definitely disunity in the party because Forbes isn't in cabinet, which again I can understand. I can also not, if that makes sense. It's a rock and a hard place for him because she clearly has a lot of support in the party, but at the same time having gone so publicly so hard against Hamza Yusuf, it is not a great look. Then you have this. I think the worst thing about it is it links the S&P to the sort of sleaze which we're used to only getting from the Tories.
100%. And as Paul says a million times, people generally have a peripheral interest in politics and they'll see this and just go, yeah, whatever, they're the same as the Tories.
Yeah, I think that's by far like the biggest issue for them. And also it's a nightmare start for Hamza Yusuf because you've got the possibility of a by-election in Margaret Ferrier's seat. I would have Labour favourites for that. Their lead is slipping both in Westminster voting intention and in Holyrood voting intention, and you get the sense almost that he might be a bit of a David Moyes at Manchester United situation.
That's not a bad.
All of the cards are possibly coming down like really, really faster than him, and I do not envy being in this position.
Yeah, it was pointed out to me actually by a leading Irish flat trainer who shall remain nameless, that Ireland, Scotland, and England, in effect, are now ruled by people of a heritage that is quite unusual in these parts. But Hamza Youssef at the moment, in terms of the trio, might actually be the most under pressure. Paul, I think Leo Varadkar is okay for the time being.
Oh, I think Hamza Youssef is definitely in the worst position, and I've got quite a lot of sympathy here because, without wanting to trigger the haters who are going to call me a conspiracy theorist, this is just typical of British politics, right? There are moves behind the scenes. There's a far wider context here, and it involves Alex Salmond and Alex Salmond's allies, right? And on long-standing divisions and issues behind the scenes in the SNP. I've no doubt she quit early for that reason, Nicola Sturgeon, because she knew this was coming.
Yeah.
And I don't want to underplay like anything that smacks of, some sort of corruption, but this is such tiny, small beer compared to the bigger issues we're talking about. I mean, look at what happened last week. Led by Donkeys, revealed that the Conservative Party's, the Carlton Club, a pivotal part of the Conservative Party, was funded by a German fascist, multi-millionaire German fascist. Yes, right. And this isn't on the news. No one's talking about it. So instead, we get cameras rocked up with police raiding Peter Murrell's house, and he's released without charge.
What a country!
Yeah, right. And I think if you go back through the past 13 years of national decline, right, you will find every single faction in British politics, whether it's David Laws for the Lib Dems and then Chris Hume going to prison over historic parking ticket allegations, right, or people being done over or being exposed over very minor and dubious sexual incidents, right?
Had a few of them in my time.
Yeah, right. And and everything that's been thrown at Labour. Oh, goodness knows all the things that have done from one faction or another has done the Labour Party. And yet the one group of people that seem completely immune from any sort of scandal whatsoever are the people who run the country and who are taking tens of millions of dodgy money every year, including Russian oligarchs. Now, again, it was dispatches about a month ago which was like 5 years overdue, about the Conservative Party and Russian oligarchs and sex scandals and all sorts, and people, all sorts of really good witnesses, including Tory ministers, basically saying this happened, right? And you think, this is a huge story. Why isn't it dominating the headlines? No one ever speaks about it ever again. Let's go on to some contrived thing in the SNP. So that's what I think of it, and I think that they are toast. I think that, they've been in government a long time, they've lost a lot of credibility, they're divided, and I suspect that Scotland's going to go back to somewhere like it was before, which is largely a Labour country, which betting-wise, I know that is what we're here to talk about and not political theatre. Labour majority is now looking really strong, because I think they're going to win 25 plus seats up there.
Yeah, it's kind of sad as well, William, if you are an advocate of Scottish independence, which I can completely see the argument for, to see what's kind of, just rolled out in the last couple of months, and such a momentum buster as well for the independence movement.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're back at Scottish independence, the last decade has got to have been a pretty gutting time to get so very close, and just be almost within touching distance of it, and now suddenly to a point where it's really highly likely now, I'd have suggested, that at the next elections you will lose a pro-independence majority, and I think this definitely has put that case back by this will sound like a big overreaction, but a decade or so at least. Just this was never happening anyway during the first term of the Labour government, anyhow. But the argument, the mandate, is likely to be very much diminished, and that's always been the argument used. Paul pointed on it, but yeah, Keir Starmer and Labour are the biggest winners of this by a million miles. It will energise Scottish Labour. It will ease the pressure on Anas Sarwar. It will also, I think, help Labour because, as Paul notes out, at the moment they're set to win a majority if you took the polls, literally. But when you get to a campaign, it is going to be much harder to take back seats which are further down the target list. It's just pure electoral maths. The bigger the majority, the harder the turnaround, and the trickier it is to allocate resources, etc. So winning a bunch of seats in Scotland will definitely take pressure off trying to reach and win Middle England. So 8-13 on a Labour majority at the moment with Star Sports looks, I think, more solid foundationally than it would have a few weeks ago, even though the polling has largely stayed the same for Westminster overall.
And interestingly, actually, in Northern Ireland, Chris Heaton-Harris seems to be playing a bit of a blinder. He has the DUP somewhat in his pocket, and Rishi Sunak has probably gotten quite a bit of kudos there. Before we wrap up, and we are coming to the end, any update on Greece and Turkey, who go to the polls shortly, Paul?
Yeah, so the polls in Greece are pretty static, as we've seen elsewhere in the world. People seem pretty fixed in their party affiliation. What that means is that the mainstream Conservatives, the incumbent New Democracy, are on around 33, 34. Syriza, the kind of, hard left, for if you want to use that term, on about 28, 29, and the soft left, PASOK, are on about 11, 12. It seems that there will probably need to be two elections because no one's going to get a majority. It seems very, very unlikely anyone will get a majority. I would have thought that by far the likeliest outcome is a Syriza PASOK, a left coalition. It's not out of question that PASOK would go in with New Democracy. That's not totally impossible, but I think that the likeliest thing is that Alexis Tsipras will be the Prime Minister again. I would, I would make that something like. Well, I've priced it up for Bet Online, but that's responding to money for New Democracy. I've gone to who will provide the next Prime Minister, 10 to 11 Syriza, 11 to 10 New Democracy, 12 PASOK. My personal view is Syriza should be slightly shorter in the betting than that, more like 4 to 6.
Last word to you, William.
Yeah, Paul gives a very good summary there, and I'd be loath to challenge the experts in the experts' backyard. They are just a couple of the really interesting elections that we've got this year already. We've had Finland, I believe in Estonia, have had elections this year, Poland later.
What did you make of Finland, actually, Marin, getting deposed?
Very depressing.
Yeah.
Depressing, I think. Depressing, but the thing was she had challenges, right? Because first of all, the personal mandate in Finland is not quite like other areas, etc. It's coalition building. She suffered because of the economy as well. A lot of incumbents are dealing with a cost of living crisis at the moment. It's not just here. You have it here, you have it in Ireland, you have it everywhere. She struggled because of that, I think, more than anything else. And there was lots of focus on how young she was, whatever, and like her style. But when it came down to it, the old Clintonian phrase, "It's the economy, stupid," probably did for her. But I think she can look back with reasonable pride, I would say, on her term and what she's done. And of course, perhaps the most important or longest lasting change under her leadership is that Finland is now a NATO member.
Indeed.
Some of the biggest geopolitical news we've had in ages, because that frontier, of course, close to Russia, is now 800 miles longer, I think, and that's really big.
Yeah, and Paul, briefly, there is a little bit of an edge towards the right in, I've always get mixed up in Finland if it's actually Scandinavia, but in the general Northern Europe, there's actually a somewhat alarming edge towards the right in recent times.
Yeah, right-wing populism's on the rise. Nothing's been really done to challenge it. I think that immigration, race, culture wars, the the transgender question or the woke question, for people who don't even know what woke means, that has risen everywhere. And it does, you know, I would say Southern Europe as well. I mean, I would be very concerned about the next French election, right, given everything that's happening there. I'm afraid, no, I'm very much in the dystopia camp and staying there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, that makes two, if not three, of us on the polling station. And yeah, Suella Braverman, she reckons everything's okay anyway. Send them all back to Africa, and we'll all be grand. I think we got through a good bit there. You know, it was a pretty historic week, obviously, in politics. First U.S. president to get arrested, and how we got into a situation where this has actually probably increased Donald Trump's chance of being elected next year. I can't answer that. And that's why I like Paul. I'm in the dystopian camp, and then we haven't even gotten to climate change. We probably will next week on the polling station.